Heavenly Revelation. Jesus confirms the miraculous 3 days of darkness, prophetic dates and secrets unveiled. In the quaint village of Stonemere, a stirring began to rise, echoing through the cobbled streets like a whisper of divine urgency. Margaret, a devoted woman steeped in faith, often found herself alone in the parish church, the scent of incense mixing with the dust of age-old prayers hanging in the air. Her heart was heavy, for she had started receiving visions, troubling glimpses of darkness creeping towards her beloved community. Each night, when the world around her quieted, the visions would come, shadows swirling, foreboding whispers hinting at a calamity set to envelop Stonemere. It was a divine warning, she believed, and she felt compelled to act. As her worries deepened, Margaret's spirit remained unbroken. During Sunday service, after fervent pleading, she gathered the courage to share her revelations with her fellow congregants. A hush fell over the chapel. The wooden beams seemed to pulse with trembling uncertainty. Some villagers clung to their steadfast beliefs, while others cast doubtful glances her way. "Margaret, dear, perhaps it's just a flight of fancy," murmured Mrs. Beckett, her brow furrowed in concern. The doubt in the congregation stung her heart, and for the first time, fear inched in. Yet, as she retreated into prayer, the visions only grew stronger. Darkness, visible in her mind's eye, clawed at the edges of her faith. But hope flickered. A series of miraculous healings began to occur, whispers of divine presence rekindling faith. A sickly child laughed for the first time. Old Mr. Grayson, unable to walk for years, found himself dancing in the garden, arms lifted towards the sky. Each miracle was a teasing glimpse of the kingdom, bringing warmth to Margaret's heart. How could such wonders coexist with her dire visions? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Amid the growing unease, Margaret led a prayer gathering, her voice steady despite her turbulent spirit. As friends, neighbors, and even skeptics came together, the chapel echoed with hymns that hadn't been sung in years, weaving a tapestry of unity and hope. The once distant light of faith now shone brightly, illuminating the darkness that threatened their village. Hearts rekindled, hands joined, with the very air thickening with a sense of divine purpose. But just as Margaret felt a breakthrough was within reach, a chilling silence descended one evening. The sky turned a deep indigo, and all fell still. The wind held its breath, and shadows elongated into daunting forms. The villagers huddled together, eyes wide, hearts racing. Margaret whispered a prayer, the weight of her visions crippling her spirit. And then, in that profound stillness, a miraculous transformation unfolded. A light, warm and ethereal, poured from the heavens, bursting forth like a sunrise after a long dark night. It wrapped around the villagers with an embrace that felt like home. "This is what the visions herald," Margaret cried, astonished. The flickering flames of fear were doused by irrevocable hope, each villager's heart illuminated, spirit revived. As laughter, worship, and shouts of joy filled the air, they gathered to share testimonies, a chorus of divine encounters revealing the beautiful truth behind their trials. But as the night grew deeper, Margaret's questions remained, echoing in her heart. What did this miracle truly mean? Would they stand united against the darkness that loomed? The village of Stonemere was forever changed, yet the mystery of their divine calling lingered, pulling them forward into uncharted territory. The village held its breath as that breath of hope swept through, yet amid the joy, uncertainty loomed like a shadow hovering just out of sight. The gathering found an ecstatic rhythm as the villagers celebrated the light that descended that fateful evening. But suspicions tugged at the back of Margaret's mind, like threads woven into a tapestry of doubt. Was this brilliance merely a fleeting blessing, or a sign of something much greater to come? Days passed, and the villagers embraced their renewed faith with fervor. They gathered nightly, filling the church with an energy that seemed to defy the darkness lurking at their doorstep. Margaret often helped lead the prayers, her voice ringing out in harmony with the soft hum of devotion. Yet even as her spirit soared with the gathering, she could not shake the deep-seated feeling that their struggles were far from over. One evening, as a warm breeze danced through the open windows, Margaret felt compelled to speak again about her visions. "Friends," she began, her heart racing, "I know the light has come, but there are still shadows lurking at the horizon. We must prepare ourselves for what is to come." An uneasy murmur rippled through the congregation. They had been so caught up in the joy of miraculous moments that some struggled to entertain the thought of darkness returning. Margaret watched as the whispers of doubt spread. The comforting glow of faith turned brittle. One sturdy voice broke through, a man named Samuel, who stood tall with authority. "Margaret, we have felt the Spirit among us. Why dwell on what might come when the light is here now?" While some nodded in agreement, the seeds of hesitance burrowed deeper into her heart. The following days grew heavy, much like the air before a storm. Rumors began to filter through Stonmere. Shadows appeared at dusk, figures that flickered just beyond the reach of the streetlights, and the villagers whispered of feeling watched. Yet the rising tide of their faith also gave way to renewed strength. They held nightly vigils, singing songs of praise and burning candles that illuminated the faces of those gathered. Gathering strength and unity, they began to reconstruct their belief that they could withstand whatever darkness approached. Margaret, however, felt the weight of her visions growing even heavier. Each night she dreamed of the encroaching darkness, a dark figure standing before a door, unyielding, demanding entry. She awoke soaked in sweat, the figure lingering in her mind like a silent plea for attention, a call to action. The dreams intensified, and the boundary between reality and vision began to blur. At last, in a moment of divine clarity, Margaret turned to her beloved villagers. "We must stand together, united as the light we have witnessed. We must not fear what may come, instead, we must confront it. Pray with fervor. Worship without hesitation. Only then shall we be prepared for the battles ahead." The gathered crowd fell silent, their eyes wide as a collective resolve began to knit itself together, a doctrine fashioned from their fears and hopes alike. Just as hope began to solidify, a figure loomed on the edge of the village, a sight that rooted them to the spot. Clad in a cloak darker than midnight, the figure lingered, waiting, watching. Margaret could feel the urgent beat of their united hearts, pulsing a rhythm of defiance against the looming darkness. She took a step forward, heart pounding yet determined. "We shall not cower," she declared, a flame igniting within her spirit as she stood before her community. "For we walk in the light of our God, a light that will banish the darkness." As the figure moved closer, she felt a swell of faith among her people. But what awaited them next was cloaked in mystery and fraught with divine purpose, sending a shiver down her spine. Would their prayers be enough? Would their bonds withstand the crucible that approached? Margaret drew in a sharp breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, knowing that the answers were just beyond that darkened figure waiting silently at the village's edge. The air felt electric, charged with the tremors of the moment. The figure, swathed in shadow, moved closer, each step sending rippling waves of apprehension through the villagers. Margaret could see the flicker of candlelight reflecting off the figure's cloak, illuminating a sense of dread that crawled up her spine. She felt the weight of the world hang in the balance. "What do you seek?" Margaret called out, her voice steady even in the face of fear. The villagers around her drew closer, their unity pressing against the uncertainty like a shield formed from faith. A chill swept through the gathering, as if the very atmosphere was bending to listen, to understand. The figure paused, and for an instant, the darkness enveloping it seemed to pulse like a beating heart. The villagers exchanged nervous glances, uncertainty etched on their faces. Suddenly, a booming voice erupted from the cloaked figure, resonating deep within their souls. "I am the guardian of shadows," it declared, each word soaked in gravity. "I come not to destroy, but to test the light you have found. Will it withstand the tempest I bring?" Margaret's heart raced, but she could not falter. "We are not afraid," she proclaimed, though her spirit craved the support of those surrounding her. "Our faith is built on the light that fills us. What test shall you bring?" The figure raised an arm, and for a moment, the shadows gathered like a storm cloud, swirling, amplifying the sense of foreboding. You will face 3 trials, it intoned, one for each day of darkness that approaches. Only those who withstand the test shall continue to walk in the light. An uneasy hush settled over the crowd. The weight of doubt pressed in around them again, but Margaret sensed a flicker of courage ignite within their hearts. It was as if hope danced with fear, swirling in a divine embrace. Yet the gravity of the figure's words echoed louder than any hymn. What are these trials? Samuel stepped forward, his voice breaking through the heavy murmur. What shall we need to prove? Your faith shall be tested in the realms of love, trust, and resilience, the guardian responded, and with each word, the air pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Should you falter, darkness will be your companion. But should you prevail, you will not only banish what comes, but grow in strength, and your community shall shine like a beacon of hope. Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment, inviting clarity. Her heart began to settle, fueled by an understanding that turned her fear into purpose. This was not merely a matter of survival, but a divine invitation to deepen their faith. She opened her eyes, addressing the village with renewed vigor. We will face these trials together. In love, we will uplift one another. In trust, we will stand firm against doubts. And in our resilience, we shall shine brighter than ever before. The atmosphere thickened with reverberating hope, igniting flickers of defiance among the villagers. They began to murmur words of affirmation, a chorus of shared belief rising like the early dawn light breaking a long night of gloom. Be prepared. The guardian boomed, retreating slightly. Darkness will arrive in 3 days' time. Pray for guidance, for each trial will reveal truths awaiting to be seen. Margaret felt the words seep into her very being, igniting a resolve in her spirit. She looked out over the assembled crowd, eyes bright with determination. They could confront any storm together. As the guardian of shadows faded into the night, the villagers clasped hands, forming a barrier woven from prayers and promises. What began as uncertainty had transformed. A call for unity echoed in the depths of their hearts, stirring a beautiful tension between hope and preparation. As Margaret led them in prayer, fervent and imploring, she felt the whispered voice of the divine urge her on. What should we learn from this journey? What gifts lie hidden within each trial that could elevate not just our spirits, but our entire village? A profound stillness filled the space left by the guardian, each heartbeat quickening with anticipation of what was to come. Margaret held her breath, knowing the answers lay just beyond. What lessons and miracles awaited them as they prepared for the shadows? The sun was hesitant to rise, the heavy clouds gathering like whispers of discontent. Margaret stood at the edge of the village, an uneasy sense of anticipation gnawing at her heart. In her spirit, she felt the looming presence of the darkness promised by the guardian. Yet she also sensed the flame of faith flickering fiercely among her neighbors. Gather round! We must prepare our hearts! She called, her voice carrying a warmth that struck the chill in the air. The villagers, still weary but filled with a shared purpose, moved toward her. Eyes shone with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Together they formed a circle, their hands clasped tightly, as if their unity could hold back the storm. Margaret closed her eyes and surrendered herself to prayer, inviting the presence of the Holy Spirit into their midst. She felt the warmth of divine love encircle them, softening the edges of fear. Lord, she whispered, guide us through this trial. Strengthen our hearts with love, trust, and resilience. Reveal to us the deeper gifts hidden within these tests. Help us not to falter. As the villagers joined in, Margaret sensed their voices intertwined with hers, creating a tapestry of faith. Each word was like a brushstroke of light against the gathering shadows outside their circle. The air shimmered with possibility, and she felt a divine energy coursing through her. Margaret! Called out Ruth, an elder of the village, her voice steady as a mountain. The first trial, it shall be our test of love. How can we prepare? Margaret opened her eyes, the dawn light beginning to break through the clouds. There was a beauty in the challenge before them. Love was something they already carried within. We must reflect on our relationships, she said slowly. Let us show love not just to those who are easy to love, but to those we may struggle with. We must open our hearts wide enough to embrace even the unlovable. The villagers nodded in agreement, their faces lighting up with understanding and determination. They began discussing those they could reach out to, those they had disagreements with, or those who felt alienated. It was clear, they must build bridges of love and understanding. As they brainstormed together, a sense of peace settled over Margaret. She could see each villager's heart responding to the call, transforming confusion into courage, and isolation into community. In the days that followed, those darkened corners of their hearts began to illuminate. Margaret saw Samuel share a meal with an estranged neighbor. She witnessed Ruth reconciliating with an old friend after years apart. Love was no longer just a word for them, it became an active force. But it wasn't easy. Each act of love challenged them, peeling away layers of resentment and fear. Yet, for every challenge, they leaned on one another, praying together, lifting their voices in choir. "In love, we rise," they would chant, and the air thrummed with joy. As the sun began to set on the second day, an unexpected quiet settled over the village. Margaret stood before her gathered friends, the signs of love's labors evident in their glowing faces. "We have begun to conquer the first test," she exclaimed. "But we must stay vigilant, for tomorrow brings the trial of trust. This is where we will need each other even more." A collective murmur of concern rippled through the villagers, worry creeping in as they considered the challenge of trust. It felt delicate, like a fragile thread that could unravel so easily. "Trust can be difficult," said Samuel, his voice carrying the weight of recognition. "But we have already learned we can turn our fears into faith." Margaret smiled, encouraged by his insight. "Yes. When fear knocks, let our faith answer. We will unite in trust, and through that trust, our love will be fortified." The flickering candlelight around them cast a gentle glow, illuminating the outlines of their shared resolve. They were ready to face whatever came their way. As night fell like a cloak around the village, Margaret felt the gravity of what lay ahead. If we are to trust, we must allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We need to let God guide us through this together. Her heart raced at the thought of what the next day would unfold. Could they truly embrace the trials ahead? With shadows looming closer, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that divine revelations were still waiting to be unveiled. The echoes of their prayers hung in the air, inviting divine intervention. It filled her with anticipation. Would their faith sustain them? The morning sun would soon rise again. Would they find the strength to embrace the gift of trust? Margaret awoke before dawn, an anxious energy pulsing within her. The village lay silent, the air thick with the scent of dew-kissed earth and the promise of a new day. As first light crept through the window, she took a moment to breathe deeply, centering herself in prayer. "Lord, give us strength," she murmured, "for today we face the trial of trust." The day felt different. Shadows from the night lingered not just in her heart but seemed to wrap around the village, suffocating the vibrant faith they had built. She could sense the weight of expectation resting on her shoulders. With every step outside, she saw the villagers emerging from their homes, a mixture of apprehension and determination on their faces. Together, they gathered once more in the heart of the village, united once again in a circle of hope. Margaret could feel the tension woven through the group, a thread of unspoken fears over trust. Trust, she began, glancing around their circle, is a leap into the unknown. It is surrendering our control and saying yes to God's plans. Samuel stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "But how do we trust when there is so much uncertainty? I fear we might fall." His words hung heavy in the air. There was a shared tension as they realized the vulnerability in trusting not only the divine, but each other. Margaret placed her hands lovingly on Samuel's shoulders, feeling the tremor in his spirit. "Trust is like a bridge," she said softly. "It holds when we walk together. Alone, we may falter, but together, we can carry each other across." A murmur of agreement flickered around the circle. Ruth, her voice steady, added, "We must remind ourselves of each moment we were held through our doubts. How many times have we leaned on God and felt our burdens lighten?" At her words, visions danced in Margaret's mind, moments of laughter shared, times when tears had flowed freely but love had prevailed. Each moment was a stepping stone, building their foundation of trust and love. Their conversation deepened, and the villagers began to share stories of past struggles where their faith had led them through darkness. One by one, they opened their hearts, unveiling pieces of their vulnerability until a palpable warmth began to surround them. But as the sun climbed higher, Margaret realized they also needed an action. "We need to put our words into practice," she declared, her voice rising with resolve. "Let us form smaller groups, seek each other out today, share both our joys and our fears. Learn to trust the heart of your neighbor." With renewed energy, they agreed and dispersed. Margaret felt a swell of hope ascend in her spirit. She would visit young Thomas, an upset boy who had distanced himself from the group, feeling unworthy after a recent failure. As she approached his home, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying whispers of encouragement. She knocked softly, and was met with a hesitant gaze. "Thomas, can we talk?" she asked, stepping into his space uninvited yet necessary. At first he was guarded, but as she shared her own struggles with doubt, walls began to crumble. They talked and laughed, and as if guided by some invisible force, Margaret felt their hearts slowly intertwining in a dance of trust. As they finished, a golden light filtered through the window, bathing the room. It felt electric, as if God was smiling down upon them. Tears of gratitude brimmed in Thomas's eyes. "I didn't know it was okay to be scared," he admitted. With joy swelling in her heart, Margaret whispered, "It's okay, dear one. We're meant to lift each other up, not walk alone." The day wore on, and as evening fell, the villagers reconvened. Faces were radiant, filled with experiences that stirred the soul. They shared stories of courage, vulnerability, and connection that had unfolded as they reached out in trust. But then, amidst their celebration, a tremor of foreboding rustled through them. "Tomorrow," Margaret began, her voice steady but tinged with gravity. "Tomorrow we face the trial of faith. Are we truly ready to trust Him fully?" The room hushed, and worry flickered in eyes which had known only a moment ago radiant faith. Margaret could hear the whisper of divine mystery trailing beyond tomorrow. Would they embrace it? As night enveloped the village in quiet, the flickering stars overhead twinkled like promises yet to be fulfilled. And in the stillness, Margaret felt the divine presence drawing closer, preparing to unveil the next lesson. As dawn broke the next day, Margaret awoke with a heaviness in her heart. Day loomed like a shadow over the village, a day enveloped in uncertainty. The air felt charged, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the unfolding of God's plan. Gathering her thoughts, she whispered a prayer, "Lord, guide us through this trial. Let our faith rise in the face of fear." The words, simple but earnest, flowed from her lips, carrying the weight of a community's hopes and worries. Margaret's heart raced as she made her way toward the gathering place. Villagers shuffled about with voices subdued, their faces betraying a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The circle they formed this time felt heavier, the invisible bonds of connection strained by the unknown that awaited them. She stepped forward, her brow furrowed in thought. "Today, we are called to examine our faith," she began, her voice steady but imbued with emotion. "What does it truly mean to trust when the darkness seems close?" As she spoke, she noticed Samuel pacing nervously at the edge of the circle. His hand ran through his hair as his eyes darted around, searching each face present. "But what if," he stammered, "what if the darkness overwhelms us?" A collective sigh escaped the group, a murmur of shared fear. Margaret could feel the rising tide of anxiety like a storm brewing, but she knew they had to navigate it together. "It's easy to trust when the path is clear," she replied gently, stepping closer to Samuel, "but faith shines brightest in the darkest of nights." Ruth chimed in, her voice like a soothing balm. "Remember the times we faced impossible odds. Each time, our faith was the light that led us through. Let us not forget those moments." Nods erupted around the circle, the warmth of renewed connection beginning to dispel the cold dread that loomed. As they shared stories, Margaret sensed the Spirit moving among them, instilling courage like wildfire igniting the dry brush. Yet, just as hope swelled, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and gripping their hearts with a hint of foreboding. Thomas, who had come to sit with the others, looked up wide-eyed. "What if these trials are to test us?" What if we're not strong enough? Margaret steadied her breath. She needed to respond with love and assurance. Strength is not about having it all figured out. It's recognizing our weakness and leaning into God's grace. Remember, even a flicker can light the way through the darkest paths. A murmuring agreement seemed to pass through them, each person grounding themselves in the truth only faith could provide. It was then that Margaret felt a shift, a stirring of something profound. Just as the sun began to rise fully, a radiant beam pierced through the heavy clouds, illuminating the gathering. Faces turned upward, the warmth of the light washing over every soul present. "Look!" cried Samuel. "It's as if God is shining upon us." Their spirits lifted, an unspoken realization flowed among the villagers. In that moment, their trust began to blossom anew, intertwining with the very essence of divine light. "Let us hold on to this light, even as we face the darkness," Margaret urged, a fire ignited within her. Babbling words of encouragement filled the space, hearts began to beat together in unity. Cries of "We are not alone" echoed through the air, punctuated by frequent glances toward the heavens, aware of the unseen audience above. But then, just as quickly as the moment of clarity arrived, the wind shifted again. The skies darkened, and a shroud of foreboding loomed closer. Margaret's heart raced as she felt the palpable moment of spiritual weight returning. "Do we truly believe?" she called out, challenging the collective spirit of the villagers. They stood in silence, awaiting the answer that would define their day. Would they step forward in faith, or retreat in fear? As the shadows encroached, Margaret could sense a heavy presence filling the air, as if heaven was about to reveal something extraordinary. What would it be that they would uncover in this trial of faith? How would they respond when shadows danced dangerously close? As the heaviness of the shadows drew near, Margaret felt the weight of expectancy in each heart around her. Silence hung thick in the air, a collective inhale as if all were waiting on a divine signal. The dark clouds swirled ominously above, mirroring the storm brewing within her soul. She knew they stood at a threshold, one foot in faith and the other teetering on fear. "Brothers and sisters," she began, her voice steady yet tender, "this darkness, it challenges us. But remember, the darkest hour comes just before dawn. There is a promise awaiting us." Samuel's eyes searched hers. "You really believe that?" His voice cracked, and for a brief moment, doubt flickered across his face. "Yes," she replied fervently, emboldened by the bright spark in her heart. "We are never abandoned, even when it feels like all hope is lost. Our God sees us. Our God hears us." A whisper of amen floated through the group, but the tension remained. Margaret felt it, the exhausting pull between belief and despair. They needed something more, a revelation, a sign. Just then, without warning, a powerful gust of wind swept through the clearing, howling like a voice from the heavens. The villagers gasped, clutching one another tightly. In that moment, a rift opened in the clouds, revealing a glimmer of light, faint but undeniable. The light began to grow, illuminating not just their faces but also the doubts that clung desperately to the edges of their hearts. "There it is!" shouted Ruth, her voice rising with a mix of astonishment and hope. "Look closer," urged Margaret, drawing their gazes upward. For in that divine light, Margaret saw through the layers of uncertainty. It pulsed with joy and an unshakable promise, beckoning them away from their fears. Suddenly, Margaret was overcome with a rush of clarity. This is not the end for us. The trials we face now are part of a greater story, a promise woven through the fabric of our faith. God is moving. He is here, among us. A wave of energy surged through the circle, gripping hands and joining hearts. Encouraged by her courageous demonstration of belief, voices rose, powerful and unified. "We will stand firm. We will walk in faith." But as quickly as it came, the light pulsed and dimmed beneath the returning shadows. A cautious stillness fell again, urging them to listen closely. "Will we let fear guide us?" Margaret asked, her voice soft yet resonant, "or will we let this moment strengthen our resolve? The choice is ours." Just then, from the depths of darkened clouds, a breathtaking revelation flashed, a fleeting image, a figure radiant in majestic light, standing against the backdrop of night. Gasps broke out, eyes wide with wonder. "Is it?" someone murmured. "Could it be?" Margaret felt the weight of eternity in that moment. The villagers held their breath, caught between what they saw and what they understood. From the distance, a voice, tender and wise, rose above the noise of their hearts. "Trust in me, for days of darkness bring forth also days of light." Hope radiated through their midst like golden threads weaving into a tapestry of faith. Each voice hushed, hearts gathered in collective awe. The figure seemed to diminish into the shadows, yet the warmth of the message lingered. "Let us be ready for what is to unfold," Margaret erupted, ignited by the promise of divine revelation. She sensed that something extraordinary was beginning, that hope was kindling, and miracles were waiting to break free. But no one could predict how deep the darkness would stretch, nor what awaited on the other side. Margaret took a steadying breath. What did we just witness? What is unfolding in our midst? The weight of the unanswered questions hung heavy, and the villagers found themselves standing at the edge of the divine, wondering what God would reveal next. The murmur of anticipation hung in the air as the villagers stood entranced, grappling with the awe of what they had just witnessed. Margaret could feel the heartbeat of their collective spirit, a rhythm that pulsed with both trepidation and hope. The air was electric, as if the very heavens were poised to unveil something profound. Margaret looked around. The faces that had been shadowed by despair now glimmered with a flicker of faith. She raised her hands, palms open, as if to invite the light that had vanished too soon back into their midst. "Do not falter in your belief," she urged, her voice rising above the rustling leaves and soft whispers. "This is a moment meant to strengthen us, not to weaken our resolve." Samuel stepped forward, the doubt in his eyes beginning to dissolve. "But how do we grasp what we cannot see? We hold on to what has been spoken to our hearts," Margaret exclaimed, her spirit ignited. "Remember the promise. In every darkness, there is the hope of light. In every trial, there is a testimony." As she spoke, the clouds shifted once more, revealing glimpses of the night sky, a canvas of stars flickering through the thinning darkness like scattered diamonds. The villagers followed her gaze, each star a reminder that the light had not truly vanished. It simply awaited the right time to shine. A newfound boldness swept through them like a refreshing breeze, urging them forward. "Tonight, let us gather together, under the promise of that light," cried Ruth, her voice catching the spark ignited by Margaret. "Let us share our stories of faith, our prayers, our hopes." One by one, they began to share. Each word was a thread woven into a tapestry of resilience. Stories flooded the circle, tales of lost loved ones who had found their way home, of lives transformed through faith, of answered prayers that had once seemed impossible. The light within them grew brighter with each testimony, illuminating the shadows that once threatened to engulf them. Margaret felt her heart surge with warmth, tears pricking at her eyes. "Hear this," she proclaimed, "when we unite in faith, we become an unstoppable force. The darkness trembles at our unity." The villagers echoed her fervor. "Together, we rise. Together, we hope," they declared, their voices a surge of passion that harmonized with the gentle wind. Then, in a moment suspended in time, it all shifted again. A promising glow emerged from the horizon, casting a soft hue over the night. As the clouds peeled away, the world began to tremble with the vibrations of something monumental. They clutched each other tighter, as they felt the earth awaken beneath them. "What is happening?" Samuel whispered, glancing upward in awe. Perhaps this is the dawn," Margaret breathed, caught between anticipation and fear. "Listen! Can you hear it?" A melody wafted through the clearing, sweet and transcendent, a heavenly chorus that seemed attuned to the very essence of their faith. All anxiety faded in the presence of that sound, washing over them like a cool stream on a sunlit day. But just as all seemed to align, the brightness flickered once more, dimming like a candle wrestling against the wind. "No!" Margaret's heart sank at the sight, the warmth of moments past feeling distant again. "Do we not trust the promise? Will we be led astray by fleeting shadows?" The villagers shared glances, uncertainty creeping back. Yet in that very uncertainty, something beautiful stirred a spirit of readiness behind each heart that beat with anticipation. "Let us not shy away from what is unfolding," Margaret encouraged, her voice steady but gentle. "If darkness is indeed upon us, let it be for a purpose that will lead us to the light." And in that pivotal heartbeat of faith, they rallied once more. "We await the dawn," they proclaimed, a chorus of conviction rising to meet the heavens. But what awaited them as dawn approached? What lay hidden behind the shadows? Margaret dared to close her eyes, praying for revelation, longing to embrace the fullness of God's promise. As the last echoes of their voices settled into the stillness of the night, a profound hush enveloped the gathering. The glow on the horizon intensified, painting the villagers' faces in soft shades of gold. Margaret opened her eyes and felt a warmth radiate from deep within, a glow that felt distinctly divine, as if the very Spirit of God was drawing near. "Can you feel it?" she whispered, capturing the attention of those around her. "It is as though heaven is breathing upon us." Around them, the villagers nodded, their previous doubts melting away like morning dew in the sun. The air buzzed with an expectant energy, a sacred moment that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. With every heartbeat, the presence of something miraculous lingered, inviting them to open their hearts wider. Margaret turned her gaze skyward, her heart alight with hope. "We need to trust in what we cannot see. Remember the promise, He will never leave us nor forsake us." Her voice rang out with conviction, serving as a balm to their wearied spirits. The sound of the heavenly melody returned, richer now, cascading down like a waterfall of sweetness. It mingled with the rustling leaves, creating a symphonic embrace of praise. Each note wrapped around them, urging them to surrender their fears to the unfolding mystery. "Together we are the candle in the night," Ruth declared joyfully, lifting her hands high. "Shall we vent our praises? Shall we sing into the night?" With that proclamation, the villagers found their voices, united in an impromptu song, a blend of heart and soul. The air shimmered, casting reflections of their faith upon the very heavens. Yet, as they sang, an unexpected shadow swept across the land. The bright glow from the horizon began to dim again. The villagers gasped, the previously warm embrace turning chill. "What does this mean?" Samuel's voice trembled, a hint of fear creeping back in. The flickering stars appeared to tremble too, as if whispers of confusion floated through the night sky. Margaret stepped forward, her spirit unbroken. "Do not fear. Remember, in the face of uncertainty, we must cling to what we know. As the dawn approaches, we may encounter shadows first. These shadows do not define us, they only prepare us for the light." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd, doubts mingling with determination. The villagers gripped one another's hands tighter, creating a chain of belief that pulsated with renewed vigor. Just then, amidst the flickering shadows and rising song, a voice broke through, soft yet powerful, like the gentle rustle of wings. "Awake, my beloved, for the dawn is at hand. Fear not, for the light that conquers all shadows draws near." The villagers froze, stunned as the familiar voice coursed amongst them. Heartbeats quickened, and tears mingled with glimmers of hope. "Jesus!" someone breathed, and the name held a weight of love and promise. Margaret looked towards the origin of the voice, her heart hammering with sacred expectation. "Is it you, Lord?" she called out, her voice shaky but filled with wonder. From within the shadows, a figure began to form, radiant and beckoning, reflecting the very essence of light. "Have you not seen? The darkness is but a passageway to greater glory." The voice rang out clear, echoing in their hearts. "For in 3 days, what is lost shall be restored, and the dawn will sweep across the land like a river of grace." Margaret's breath caught. 3 days? The weight of those words sent ripples through her soul. What did it mean? What transformation awaited them on the other side of this night? The questions churned in her heart like a song yet to be sung. "Stay strong in faith," the figure urged, with a radiant smile that illuminated the entire clearing. "For the dawn is not merely a time, it is a promise fulfilled. Gather near to witness the wonders that will unfold." As the figure beckoned them closer, shadows danced and flickered, and the space between heaven and earth seemed to thin. The villagers drew together, eyes wide with awe and hope, their breaths mingling with the sacred promise that hung heavy in the air. What awaited them in the fullness of dawn? What divine revelation waited just beyond the shadows? As dawn's light began to creep into the village of Stonemere, a profound stillness enveloped the air, resting upon the hearts of those gathered. Margaret stood at the forefront, her spirit thrumming with anticipation, her eyes fixed upon the radiant figure slowly revealing himself. Jesus, she whispered, the name fluttering like a prayer on her lips. The warmth of his presence washed over them, obliterating doubts like sunlight scattering shadows. Fear not, for the time has come to witness the power of faith, he proclaimed, his voice resonating with authority and love. The villagers felt a divine assurance enveloping them, urging them to draw ever closer in unity, each heart open and poised to receive. Margaret sensed the weight of the moment. This was not merely an ending, but the beginning of a new chapter. What lies ahead? She asked, stepping forward, emboldened by his light. With each challenge you faced, you have sown seeds of faith, he replied, his eyes glistening with divine compassion. The trials of love, trust, and resilience have prepared you for this moment. Your darkness shall give way to a dawn filled with grace, restoring not just your joy, but the very fabric of your community. In that instant, as the sun broke through the lingering clouds, a brilliant radiance surged across the valley, painting the village in hues of gold and warmth. Gasps of wonder echoed from the villagers as they beheld the transformative beauty unfolding before their eyes. A chorus of joyful shouts filled the air, hearts swelling with overwhelming gratitude. "Look at what our faith has brought forth!" cried Ruth, her arms spreading wide as if she could embrace the dawn itself. Margaret turned to the villagers, their faces shimmering in the golden light, each one reflecting the divine promise. Together, we journey through darkness and emerge not just unchanged, but renewed. Margaret's voice rang out, touched by the very spirit they had cultivated together. Each act of love, trust exercised, and resilience shown was a building block for our triumph. As they gathered tighter, laughter spilling out among them, Margaret felt a rush of warmth swell in her chest. They had conquered the shadows, and in doing so, each villager became a bearer of light. Let us share this miracle. It is not simply ours, it is meant for all, she proclaimed, a spark igniting within her. The villagers, emboldened by Margaret's words, began to share their stories. Each testimony built upon the last, illuminating how their hearts had transformed through love, trust, and resilience. Samuel spoke of reconciling with an old rival. Ruth shared about reconnecting with her estranged daughter. Every story was a thread weaving a tapestry of divine connection, glowing brighter and brighter as the sun ascended higher, filling the landscape with its warmth. Something miraculous unfolded. The atmosphere shimmered, and from the depths of their collective joy, a song arose, a melody woven from witness and hope. They sang together, voices mingling in harmony, each note a celebration of their faith. Heaven seemed to respond. The air filled with whispers, swirls of light dancing around them, as if the very heavens rejoiced alongside the villagers. Margaret felt a deeper clarity settle in her heart. This was what their journey had been for. It was not merely about overcoming darkness, but about awakening to the light together. As the last echoes of their song faded, the figure of Jesus stepped back, his presence still vibrant yet ethereal. Carry this light forward, let it shine in all you do. Remember, the shadows may return, but you possess within you a flame that cannot be quenched. You are my beloved community. Stand firm in faith, for you are the transformation this world needs, he declared, his voice ringing with profound authority and love. With that, the scene shifted as the sun rose fully, brightening the path ahead. The villagers, hand in hand, began to venture forth, hearts aflame with newfound purpose and determination, scattering seeds of hope throughout Stonemere and beyond. Margaret looked back at the village, her heart swelling with gratitude and joy. They had faced the darkness, and found a love that lit the way. And as they embraced the light of a new day, they carried forth the promise of divine revelation within their midst. As the dust began to settle and normal life resumed, Stonemere transformed into a testament of faith. Each villager began to live their lives as shining examples of love, trust, and resilience, not only paving the way for future generations but illuminating the paths of those they encountered. And so, dear friends, the story continues beyond Stonemere. Each of us is tasked with shining that very light where darkness encroaches. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive faith stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and testimonies about this ending. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this manifestation. You need to subscribe now and be part of this faith journey. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True servants of God understand the importance of these actions. Let's carry this light forward together.